Hello, children. The story which we are going to discuss today is The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was an Irish poet. Irish means born in Ireland of 19th century. He has written many popular short stories, poems, and plays. He was a playwright, short story writer, and a poet. And The Happy Prince is one of the famous and popular short stories written by Oscar Wilde. As for the theme of this story is concerned, I have just given a note over here. You see, the theme or topic of this story is goodness of heart, noble deeds. Noble deeds means acts, noble acts, or selfless service to others. All above are the priceless. Priceless means beyond price or invaluable. Priceless virtues means good qualities of your character and nature. Okay, all about the priceless virtues which are regarded by humans. Regarded means respected. Okay, regarded by humans on the earth and God in the heaven. So these qualities, goodness of heart, noble deeds, and selfless service to the others, these are the virtues, great virtues or qualities of your character which are regarded by men and gods together. They ultimately bring enormous rewards. Enormous means huge, big rewards, as we can see in the case of Happy Prince and the sweet little swallow in this story. So this is a story by Oscar Wilde that we are going to study now. Okay, the introduction given in the book is: the Happy Prince was a beautiful statue. The name of that statue was the statue of Happy Prince. Okay, he was covered with gold, gilded means covered with gold. He had sapphires for eyes and a ruby in his sword. I will tell you about these precious stones. Sapphire is a precious stone, and ruby also is a precious stone. I will tell you about them when we discuss this story. Why did he want to part with all the gold that he had and his his precious stones? That will come across when we study the story. Okay, the first paragraph goes like this: high above the city, on a tall column, stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold for eyes. He had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. So, high above the city, on a column, the statue of Happy Prince was erected. Okay, he was gilded. Gilded means coated or covered. He was gilded, coated or covered with gold. Gold covered or coated. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. That means the statue was actually made of lead. Lead. Lead is a very hard metal. And it was made of lead, and it was gilded means covered or coated with gold, with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes he had two bright sapphires. Sapphires means, uh, it's blue in color. In Hindi it is called neelam. Sapphire means neelam. It's a precious stone. And a large red ruby. Ruby is another red color precious stone, which is called manik in Hindi. Okay, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. Hilt means handle. So on the handle of his sword, as you can see in this statue, on the handle of his sword, uh, this ruby was studded. Ruby was studded on the handle of his sword, as you can see in the picture in the statue. A picture of the statue. Then the next paragraph runs like this: one night there flew over the city a little swallow. Little swallow means a bird. You can see in the picture here. Its tail is forked, and it is a small bird. So one night there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before. but he had stayed behind and he decided to go to Egypt too. The little swallow wanted to go to Egypt, flying all the way. Okay, all day long he flew, and at night time he arrived at the city. Now he's searching for a place to perch and to pass the night. Where shall I put up? He said. Where shall I put up? He said. I hope the town has made preparations. Okay, then he expects that there are preparations for his stay during night. Then he saw the statue on the tall column. This is the column you can see in the picture. Okay, the statue was built or rested on a tall column. Okay, I will put up there, he cried. It's a fine position with plenty of fresh air. So he alighted. Alighted means got down just between the feet of the happy prince. He got down, he came down flying just between the feet of the happy prince, means here. You can see the picture. Okay. Then he was very happy. He says, I have a golden bedroom, because he thinks the statue is made of real gold. He doesn't know that it is made of lead, and it is just gilded or covered with this gold coated or gold covered statue. He doesn't know. He thinks it is the real gold. So I have a golden bedroom, he said softly to himself as he looked round, and he prepared to go to sleep. But just as he was putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him. What a curious thing! Curious means strange. He cried, there is not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright, and yet it is raining. He thinks that it is the raindrop which has fallen on him. Okay. Then another drop fell. What is the use of a statue if it cannot keep the rain off? He said, I must look for a good chimney pot. And he determined to fly away. Chimney pot means top of the chimney pipe. That's called chimney pot, from where the smoke goes out. Okay, so he thinks that he should go and stay in a chimney pot rather than staying under the statue for the night. Okay, and he determined to fly away. But before he had opened his wings, a third drop fell, and he looked up and saw, what did he see? When the third drop falls, he becomes suspicious from where these drops are coming. And he looks up. The eyes of the happy prince were filled with tears, and tears were running down his golden cheeks. His face was so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow was filled with pity. He saw that these are not the raindrops, but the statue of happy prince was weeping, and his tears were falling down on him. They were falling down. They were running down his golden cheek, and they were falling down on the little swallow. And when the little swallow saw it, he was filled with pity. He was filled with pity and sympathy for and kindness for the happy prince. Then he asks, who are you? He said. I am the happy prince. The prince replies, the statue replies. Why are you weeping then? Asked the swallow. You have quite drenched me. You have made me wet with your tears, he says. And as you are the happy prince, why are you weeping? Happy people do not weep. So why are you weeping? He was surprised. That's why he asks. Then he narrates his story to the little swallow. When I was alive and had a human heart, answered the statue, I did not know what tears were, for I lived in the palace where sorrow is not allowed to enter. My courtiers called me the happy prince, and happy indeed I was. So I lived, and so I died. And now that I am dead, they have set me up here on so high that I can see the ugliness and all the misery of this of my city. And though my heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep. He tells his story that as long as he was alive, he lived in the palace and all luxuries were available there. Very luxurious and very happy life he led as long as he was alive. No sorrow at all was there in his palace. And the courtiers, in the king's court, there are the courtiers, isn't it? So, and the courtiers called me Happy Prince, he says. They gave me the name of Happy Prince. And I lived happily and I died happily, he says. And now, as I am dead, and they have erected my statue at this elevated high place on this high platform, from here I am able to see the ugliness. Ugliness is this opposite of this something that is beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful and ugly. So I can see the ugliness and all the misery. Misery means extreme sorrow of my city. How ugly, how dirty my city is, and how miserable the people are that I can see after my death as a statue from this high high platform, he says. And though my heart is made of lead, lead is a metal, a very tough metal, yet I can't choose but weep. Still I am weeping, he says. Okay, what? Next paragraph. What? Is he not solid gold? Till now, the little swallow thought that the statue is made of solid gold. But the prince says, no, my heart is made of lead. Means the whole statue might have been made of lead. It was just covered with the gold. It was gilded. Okay. What? Is he not solid gold? Said the swallow to himself. He was too polite to make any personal remarks, but he doesn't make any further remarks. Okay. Then the statue or the happy prince asks the little swallow to do him a favor. Okay, it is there in this following paragraph. Far away, continued the statue in a low musical voice. Far away in the little street, there is a poor house. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman seated at a table. Her face is thin and worn, thin and worn. That means tired. Worn here means tired. Okay, and she has coarse red hands. Coarse means not very soft. They were not very soft, very coarse and rough hands. She has. He says, red. She has coarse red hands, all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. She's a seamstress, and her hands are pricked by the needle. Seamstress means a lady tailor. Okay, seamstress means a one who does the tailoring work or the embroidery work on the clothes. Okay, so the needles sometimes prick the fingers, and that's why the fingers were the fingers were coarse, because they were pricked by the needle. For she is a seamstress, she is embroidering flowers on a satin gown. Satin is a cloth, soft cloth gown for the loveliest of the queen's maids of honor. She is making. She says the prince says, happy prince says, she is embroidering flowers on the gown of the queen's maid. Maid means servant or the attendant. Okay. To wear at the next court ball. There is a ball dance. Next court ball dance is there, and for that she wants a dress to be embroidered, and that work she has the queen's maid has given to the seamstress, and seamstress is doing that. He says, in a bed in the corner of the room, her little boy is lying ill. He has a fever, and he is asking his mother to give him oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but river water, so he is crying. The mother was so poor she couldn't buy oranges, so she was giving just river water to drink to the child who was sick, who was in fever, high fever. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened, so this pedestal to this pedestal, and I cannot move, he says. So he asks the little swallow's favor. He says, you just remove the ruby, that precious stone, from my sword hilt, from the handle of my sword, and go and give it to that lady, that seamstress, so that she can buy oranges for her ailing or sick child. But the little swallow, replies, I am waited for in Egypt. My friends are waiting for me. Said the swallow, my friends are flying up and down the Nile. Nile is a river in Egypt. Okay, they are flying up and down the Nile river and talking to the large lotus flowers. They are talking to the flowers. It's a story. It's an imagination of the author. Okay, so they will go soon. Soon they will go to sleep. That's why I want to go to Egypt, he says. The prince asked the swallow to stay with him for one night and be his messenger. The boy is so thirsty and the mother is so sad, he said. But the swallow was not agreeing. He didn't agree. He said, I don't think I like boys. I don't like the boys, he says. And he wanted to go to Egypt. But the happy prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry. He feels sorry for the happy prince because the prince was very sad. He had a good heart and he wanted to help the poor and needy. It's very cold here, he said, but he agreed to stay with him for one night and be his messenger. He thought that he will be his messenger. He will carry his message to the seamstress, and he will stay with the prince for one night. Thank you, little swallow, said the prince. The swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in his beak over the beak means pakshi ka chonch in Hindi is called, over the roof of the town. He passed, but now these are the places from where he passes. Okay, so he flies over all these places. He passed by the cathedral. Cathedral means the main church of the town. Cathedral tower, where the white marble angels were sculptured. Marble angel sculpture or statues were made on the church tower. He passed by the palace and heard the sound of dancing. In the king's palace, people were dancing and he heard the sound. A beautiful girl came out of the balcony with her lover. I hope my dress will be ready in time for the state ball. She's the same girl whose gown the seamstress is embroidering. Okay, she's embroidering flower on the gown of this beautiful girl. Same girl. She has come out on the balcony and she is telling her lover about that ball dance and dress. She said, I have ordered flowers to be embroidered on it, on her gown. Okay, but the seamstresses are so lazy. She thinks that the seamstress is a lazy lady, but in reality, her son was ill and she was very much worried, and she was a hard-working lady. But the queen's maid didn't realize it. She was queen's maid, as you have seen in the previous paragraph. Okay. Then he passed over the river. Now he's flying over all these places and he's seeing the town. He passed over the river and saw the lanterns hanging on the masts of the ships. Masts, the these raised masts, you see the long pole like structure is there. These are called the masts. Okay, on the ships, you can see. And it was night, so the lanterns, the lamps were hanging on the masts. At last he came to the poor woman's house and looked in. The boy was tossing feverishly on his bed, and the mother had fallen asleep. She was so tired. The boy was sleepless. He was tossing. He was turning left and right, okay, and tossing. And the mother was tired, so she had fallen asleep. This is what the little swallow saw in the room of that seamstress. In he hopped, that means he hopped in jumpingly. He went inside and laid the great ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. Thimble is the finger cap, a cap worn on the finger to protect the finger while doing the sewing work. Sewing, S-E-W, sewing means you are doing the needlework, isn't it? So this thimble protects the fingertips. So just and then the thimble was on the table. So just beside it, he placed the ruby. The swallow placed the ruby. Then he flew gently round the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings. Then he flew round and round the child, the sick or ailing child, and he, just like a fan with his wings, he fanned the boy. Okay, how cool I feel, said the boy. I must be getting better. And he sank into delicious slumber, delicious sleep. The boy slept when he was fanned by the wings of the little swallow. So this noble act the little swallow did. Okay, then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. It is curious, he remarked, but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold. It's a cold season, but I feel warm now. That's because you have done a good action, said the prince. You have done a good act. That's why you are feeling warm. This is the warmth of your good act. The prince tells the swallow. Okay? And the little swallow began to think and then fell asleep. Thinking always made him sleepy. When the day broke, now the next day, when the day broke, he flew down to the river and had a bath in the morning, next morning. And he thinks, tonight I go to Egypt, said the swallow, and he was in high spirits at the prospect. Prospect means the coming event. Okay, the coming event of going to Egypt. He was very happy. So there is a picture you can see. See the sick child. She is the seamstress, and he is the sick child. And this is a thimble, isn't it? This is a thimble, which I have told you just when we discussed that paragraph, isn't it? And this is the this ruby, which he had put beside the thimble on the table. Okay, then we are discussing this paragraph. He was in high spirits, and because he thought that he will be going to Egypt, he visited all the monuments. Monuments means the ancient, very famous buildings. Okay, he visited all the monuments and sat a long time on the top of the church steeple. On the top steeple means there is some steep, slopey structures there on the top of the church. Okay, that's called steeple. So he sat on the steeple for a long time. When the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. Then in the evening, he goes back to the happy prince. Have you any commissions for Egypt? He cried. I am just starting. That's he says. The swallow says to the prince that I am going to Egypt. Have you any order or command? Any work that I can that I can do for you as I am going to Egypt? In Egypt, do you have any work? He says. So you order me. He asks the prince. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, will you stay with me one night longer? That is, he wants the swallow to stay with him one more night. Then the swallow was not ready to stay there, and he says, I am waited for in Egypt. That means my friends are waiting for me. Answered the swallow. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Then he tells, this is the second thing. The first one, he helped the seamstress. Okay. Then the second thing, the second person whom he is helping, he helped the seamstress we have seen, and he gives the ruby to the seamstress, and she is able to now buy orange for the child, and that way his thirst will be quenched, and the child will be all right. Now, this in this paragraph, see, the prince says, swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, far away across the city, I see a young man in a garret. Garret means the attic room on the top floor. See, it has the uh, sloping roof on the top of the floor, top floor. That's called garret. It's a small room, or somewhat bigger rooms also are there. They are the garret. Okay, there you store something on the top of the this on the top floor under the in the garret. So a young man is in the garret. He says he is leaning over a desk covered with papers, and in the glass by his side there is a bunch of withered violets. Violets are the flowers. Withered means they are dried, isn't it? Withered, they have become lifeless. Flowers have become lifeless in the flower pot, he says. His hair is brown and crisp, and his lips are red as a pomegranate, and he has large and dreamy eyes. He's trying to finish a play for the director of the theater. That means he was a playwright. Playwright. Playwright means one who writes play. One who writes a play. So he was a playwright, and he was writing a play for the director of the theater. The director had given him the task, and this was the source of his earning. Okay, but he is too cold to write any more. It was a cold season. There is no fire in the grate, and hunger has made him faint. He feels as if he's fainting. He's becoming unconscious almost because of hunger. He's a poor fellow, and there's no fire in the grate. Grate means the grill of metal, the metal grill which holds the charcoal. In Hindi, you call it sigdi. This metal sigdi, okay, or the metal grill which holds the fire. So there is no fire in the grate because the playwright has no money to buy coal and 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 light the fire and warm himself. No, he has no money, and that's why. And he was hungry. He didn't have enough money to buy much food, and he was fainting. This is what I see. The prince tells the swallow. Now he says, I will wait with you one night longer, said the swallow, who really had a good heart. He had a good heart that we have seen as a theme in the beginning of this story. He asked if he should take another ruby to the young playwright. Alas, means afsos, alas, I am sorry. I have no ruby now, said the prince. My eyes are all that I have left. They are made of rare sapphires. My eyes are made of rare precious stone sapphire, which were brought out of India 1,000 years ago. He ordered the swallow to pluck out one of them and take it to the playwright. He will sell it to the jeweler and buy firewood and finish his play, he said. The happy prince said, he ordered that you remove one eye and give it to the playwright, and he will buy firewood and he will buy his food also. Okay, and he will be happy. Dear prince, said the swallow, I cannot do that. I can't do that. And he began to weep because when the eye is removed, the 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 happy prince will lose one eye. He will be one-eyed person then. That's why the little swallow feels pity for the prince and he doesn't agree to remove the eye and he starts weeping, starts crying. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, do as I command you, follow my order, obey my order, he says. So the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew away to the young man's garret. It was easy enough to get in as there was a hole in the roof. So from the roof he enters in the room. Okay. Uh, Through this he darted means he entered in and came into the room. The young man had his head buried in his hands, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. The fluttering sound he didn't hear. And when he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violets. Withered violets flowers were there just near to it. Okay, on it he found the sapphire was lying. I am beginning to be appreciated, he cried. This is from some great admirer. Now I can finish my play. And he looked quite happy. He thought people are appreciating him, they are admiring him, that's why they are giving him gifts and presents. So this sapphire is a gift, he thinks. Okay. The next day, the swallow flew down to the harbor. That means the next day after he had given the sapphire, next day he flies down to the harbor. Harbor means where the ships 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 stay uh, for fuel and for some other purposes. Okay, for fuel and for buying or loading and unloading the cargo. That's called harbor. इसको आप बंदर स्थान कह सकते हैं, पोर्ट कह सकते हैं. ओके, द नेक्स्ट हिंदी में in English it is port, बंदरगाह. The next day the swallow flew down to the harbor. He sat on a mast of a large vessel. Vessel means large ship, and watched the sailors working. Sailors means shipmen, they were working. I am going to Egypt, he cried the swallow, but nobody minded. They didn't heed him. They didn't want to listen to him. And when the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. Then in the evening, after evening, he goes back to the happy prince. I have come to bid you goodbye. I have come to bid goodbye to somebody, means to say goodbye to somebody. He cried. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, will you not stay with me one night longer? Now the third night. The happy prince asks, he requests, he appeals the swallow to stay with him because he wants to do favor to some more people. He wants to help someone else. It is winter, answered the swallow, and the snow will soon be here in Egypt. The sun is warm and on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lie in the mud and look lazily about them. Oh, this is the scene in Egypt, he says, but it is very cold here, he says. Okay, Egypt, it is warm, so I want to fly away to Egypt. Then the prince says, in the square below, said the happy prince, there stands a little match girl. Match girl means the girl who sells match boxes on the street. Hawking, she sells the match boxes and earns the money. Okay, earns the money or her livelihood. There stands a little match girl. She has let her matches fall in the gutter. Gutter, channel, नाली में उसका match box गिर गया. Her matches have fallen in gutter and they are all spoiled. Her father will beat her if she does not bring home some money by selling those matches, isn't it? And she is crying. She has no shoes or stockings. Long shocks are short, stockings are longer. She has no shoes, no good shoes, and no stockings. He says she's a poor girl, and her little head is bare. There is no cap on the head. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not beat her. I will stay with you one night longer, said the swallow, but I can't pluck your eye. You would be quite blind then. One eye, one sapphire was already plucked. If the second eye also is plucked, then he says you'll be blind. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Do as I command you, you obey my order, he says. So he plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. He flew down with the sapphire. He swooped past the match girl. He flew past the match girl and slipped the jewel, that sapphire, into the palm of her hand. Okay, then the girl becomes very happy when she gets the sapphire. Okay, what a lovely bit of glass, cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing. She becomes happy. Earlier she was very gloomy, she was crying, weeping, but now, because of this noble act of the happy prince and the little swallow, there is laughter. There is a smile on her face and she is laughing. See the great act of these two, the prince and the swallow. Then the swallow came back to the prince. You are blind now, he said, so I will stay with you always. Forever I will stay with you. I will never go to Egypt, he says. No, little swallow, said the poor prince, you must go away to Egypt. No, I will stay with you always, said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. He doesn't go. Then, all the next day, he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what he had seen in the strange lands. See, the prince can't see now. His eyes are gone. They are plucked, okay, to do service to the humans. And he now the little swallow is sitting on his shoulder and telling him the stories of the strange lands. Okay, dear little swallow, said the prince, you tell me marvelous things. Marvelous things. Great, wonderful things you tell me, he says. You are telling me. But more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. Suffering. People are suffering. They are sad. They are sorrowful. That thing is more marvelous than any marvelous or wonderful story, isn't it? He says. There is no mystery so great as misery. Misery means great, great extreme unhappiness. Extreme sorrow is called misery. Extreme sadness is called misery. So this misery is the mystery. Mystery means something which is hidden. Why people are unhappy, it is difficult to say, and that's why it's a mystery, he says. It's a secret, he says. Okay, fly over the city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there. Now you have told me stories about the other lands. You fly over my city and tell me what is happening there, because he wants to help the other people. This is the fourth, isn't it? Fourth time he wants the favor of the little swallow. So the swallow flew over the great city and saw the rich making merry in their beautiful houses. Now, in this paragraph, how the city was, how the people were, they are described here, you see. And the swallow saw the rich making merry in their beautiful houses. The rich people were very happy. They were merry. They were merry. They were very happy in their beautiful houses, while the beggars were sitting at the gates of the houses in the palace. Okay. He flew into dark lanes where poor people lived in the dark lanes, and saw the white faces of starving children, children going without food, looking out listlessly. Listless means in a very dull, lifeless manner. Listlessly means in a dull and lifeless manner. Looking out, children were looking out listlessly at the black streets of their narrow lanes, the area where they lived. Under the archway of a bridge, two little boys were lying in each other's arms to try and keep themselves warm because it was cold season there, winter season there. How hungry we are, they said. You must not lie here, shouted the watchman, and they wandered out into the rain. The watchman came and he drove out those two little boys, those poor hungry boys. And it was raining, and they wandered, they roamed about in the rain. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen. All these things which you have seen in the previous paragraph, he goes back to the prince and tells him, I am covered with fine gold, said the prince. You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to the poor. The, the living always think the gold can make them happy. The living people. I am dead now, but the living people, those who are living, they think that the gold can make them happy. So remove the gold putting from my body and give it to them. Give it to the poor and needy, he says. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off, till the happy prince looked quite dull and grey. Now, as the gold coating was removed, his lead body emerged out. It was looking, it was very clearly, it could be seen very clearly. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier. Rosier means this pinkish like rose, okay? And they laughed and played in the street. He gave gold to the children, and they became very happy. We have bread now, they cried. They were going without bread, without food. Now we can buy bread as we have got gold, they said, and they became very happy. So it was a great it was a great noble act done by the prince and the prince with the help of the little swallow. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. Frost means again the snow, it becomes very solid, okay? That's called frost. The streets looked as if they were made of silver because of frost, and this frost bite is very dangerous. It can spoil your feet and your fingers, okay? Frost bite, that is called, okay? Everybody went about in fur clothes, and the little boys wore scarlet caps. Scarlet means red color caps, and skated on the ice. Ice skating they did. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. He loved him so well. He picked up crumbs outside the baker's door, that is bakery owner's door, the crumbs of this uh, bread he threw. So he picked up those crumbs, those pieces of bread, and he ate, and he saved his life somehow. Somehow uh, he saved himself because there was nothing to eat because of extreme cold weather. So he picked up crumbs of outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking, and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. There was no fire to keep him warm, so he flapped his wings and warmed himself. This is how he is helping himself. But At last he knew that he was going to die because of extreme cold and hunger. He was going to die, he thought. Okay. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. Goodbye, dear prince, he murmured. Will you let me kiss your hand? I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little fellow. The prince thinks that he's flying now to Egypt, and that's why he's saying goodbye to me. So he says, I'm happy that finally you are going to Egypt. Said the prince, you have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you. The prince says, it is not to Egypt that I am going, said the swallow. I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, is he not? So I am going to die. The little swallow tells the happy prince, and he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. He kisses and he falls down and he dies on the spot. So, a very tragic death he had, but he died while serving the needy, the poor, and the humanity in need. Humanity in need. He died doing all noble acts. That is the great character of this bird and the great character of the happy prince in this story. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue. Cracking sound was heard inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart, leaden means heart made of lead, the metal, lead. The leaden heart had snapped right into two. It was broken in two pieces. The heart made of lead was broken into two pieces, and a great, curious, very strange cracking sound was heard. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost because of extreme frost, hard frost, and cold weather. The heart had broken. But actually, it is symbolic. The heart had broken because the little swallow died, and the prince could not tolerate the passing away of that bird. That bird had become his friend. So as his friend died, the happy prince also became very sad, and his heart broke into two pieces because he couldn't resist. He couldn't tolerate the death of his friend, death of a noble friend who had been carrying his command and who had been helping the poor, obeying his command. Okay, so that's why his heart broke. This is the symbolic here in this story. Okay. Early the next morning, what happens? You see, early the next morning, the mayor of the city, the mayor was walking in the square below in the company with the town councillors. Councillors means they are the people's representatives, the members of the council, city council. As they passed the column, on the column the statue was erected. As they passed the column, he looked up at the statue. The mayor looked at the statue. Dear me, this is the expression of surprise. Dear me, how shabby, how ugly, how shabby, naked the happy prince looks, he said. The mayor said. And as he said, the councillors also said the same thing. How shabby indeed, cried the town councillors, who always agreed with the mayor, and they went up to look at it. The ruby has fallen out of his sword, his eyes are gone, and he is golden no longer. Gold also is gone, said the mayor. In fact, he is little better than a beggar. He has become a beggar. Nothing more than a beggar, he says. Okay? See, ruby has gone, sapphires also are gone, and the gold also is removed from his body. So he has become a beggar, he says. A very miserable condition. A very sad condition is narrated here, you see. Little better than beggar, said the town councillors. And here is actually a dead bird at the feet, continued the mayor. The mayor saw the body of the dead little swallow, and he says, there is a dead bird at the feet of the happy prince. We must really issue a proclamation. Proclamation means official announcement. We should make an official announcement that birds are not allowed. Birds are not to be allowed to die here. Birds should not be allowed to die at the feet of such statues, he says. And the town clerk made a note of the suggestion. Here there is a picture. You can see uh, he's the mayor and they are the councillors. And here there is a statue, and here there is the dead bird. You can see in the picture. Okay. So what they do, that is in the next paragraph. So they pulled down the statue. They dismantled the statue. Okay, they pulled down. They raised the statue to the ground. They raised the statue to the ground. So they pulled down the statue of the happy prince. They demolished it. They broke it. As he is no longer beautiful, he is no longer useful, said the art professor at the university. They took advice of the art professor who was working at the university, and he also said, though, yes, you dismantle it, you you break it and dismantle it, he said, he advised. Okay, and the art professor said that he's not he said doesn't look beautiful now. There is no use of keeping this statue erected there any longer. Okay, then they so the statue was removed. Okay, then they melted the statue in a furnace. Furnace is the fireplace. Fireplace in the foundry. Foundry means the metal casting factory or workshop. Foundry. Okay, and in the foundry there is a fireplace where the metal is melted at a very high temperature. So they melted the statue in a furnace. What a strange thing, said the overseer. That means who oversees the work of the workman, one who looks after the work of the workman, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. Foundry means, I have told you, metal casting factory or workshop is called foundry. That building, okay, is called foundry. This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. It is not melting. We must throw it away. So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. So they throw the heart in the dust, on the dust, on the heap of dust. Okay, and there the dead body of little swallow was also lying. So the heart and the dead body of the little swallow, they lay there side by side. This is how these two characters, two fellows who had been doing the noble act throughout their life, meet a very tragic end. They sacrifice their life while serving the poor and needy, while serving those pitiable people who needed their help, very greatly. Okay, and they died serving the humanity. So in this way, we can see that their act of kindness, compassion, and sympathy was a great act. Doing the great act, both of them had died. The little swallow and the happy prince. Okay. After death, what happens? It is very, very important. You see here. Bring me, you can see here, bring me the two most precious things in the city, said God to one of his angels. The God sent the angels down to earth, and he said, you go to the city of that happy prince and bring me two most precious things. Okay, said God to one of his angels. And the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. In the angels, they understand the reality. Humans don't understand, but the angels are the supernatural beings. They have a different kind of understanding. They understand what is there in your mind, what is there in your heart. Everything they are able to see. They can see the past, present, and the future. So the angel goes down and he takes the leaden heart and the dead bird, which were thrown on a dust heap. From there, the angel lifts these two things: the heart made of lead, the the happy princess heart, and the dead bird's body, little Surya's body. And he takes them to God. You have rightly chosen, said God. For in my garden of paradise, paradise means heaven, this little bird shall sing forevermore. That means the God has given a very, very comfortable and nice place to the little swallow after his death. He says, forever in paradise, in heaven, this little bird will be with me, and he will always be happy and singing forever in my garden, and he will be leading a very, very happy and comfortable life. Now he is dead, he is comfortable now, you see. And in my city of gold, the happy prince shall praise me. So he says, the God gives a gold city, the whole city made of gold to the happy prince. And he was made the prince of that gold city. And he says, I'm giving this gold city, I'm building this gold city for the happy prince, and he will be the prince of that gold city, and he will always remember me, and he will praise me. He will praise me, the God says. That means the God has given right places to the little swallow. He has given him the place in the paradise, garden of paradise, okay, and a gold city he has given to the noble prince who died, who sacrificed his life for the poor and needy. In this way, the act of nobility finally pay you, ultimately they pay you in your life. This is what we understand, and that is the great moral of this story. In this way, my dear boys and girls, we come to the end of this story, a beautiful story by Oscar Wilde. Okay, there are the questions in the end of this story. You attempt them. In case of any doubt, you can talk to me. That's all for today. Thank you very much.